This excerpt from the public television program, The Piano Guy, is brought to you by the Roland Corporation. I'd like to talk now about a great tune called Never Can Say Goodbye. And to work through the tune with me is my good friend, David Benoit. Hi, David.
Scott.
How are you?
Good, good.
Now, this, you were telling me before we started shooting, this one kind of has some history with your earlier days of playing gigs, huh?
Yeah, that's right. A lot of people think probably all I ever did was just play my own music and jazz piano, but I think I must have been 17 or 18. I made my living at a club in Redondo Beach just playing top 40.
Really?
Yeah.
A single gig, or was it with a trio?
It was with a band. We had a singer and guitar player, and of course they didn't have any piano, so I had a Fender Rhodes electric piano, the suitcase model that used to just reside in my Volkswagen Squareback.
Yeah, and it was so light, wasn't it? It was,
In fact, the club was upstairs. And my dad would come meet me and help me bring this thing up the stairs. And
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Why don't you play a couple measures so we can get the tune in our ear, and then we'll start hacking through it.
All right.
It is so funny how those, a lot of those tunes that were such big hits, it's like ear candy. You hear a couple measures and you're like, yeah, and you kind of get back to hearing the whole tune and all that. Now again, we've got this digital piano set on a Fender Rhodes, an electric piano sound. It's kind of that old authentic sound. That sound has been used a lot. I mean, a lot. You think of like a lot of the Steely Dan stuff, a lot of them, just on and on and on, and now it's almost making a resurgence, I think. We hear it in a lot of jazz things now that are coming back that way. But it is a warm sound. Now, when you're playing like on an electric piano sound like that, do you do anything differently as far as voicings, or trying to keep things spread out, or any thoughts that way of playing a little differently?
One of the things that the Fender Rhodes has, of course, the chorusing vibrato sound, which allows you to kind of have this floaty sort of, it's like a warm blanket. So when you hit this is an E minor 9 chord, and you can just let it kind of sit there. With piano, I would probably tend to embellish more. And we used to call it a pad sound. In fact, in my old days of studio work, you'd lay the piano track down, and then it was always, let's put on the Rhodes pad.
Okay.
Almost like it acted like strings. It just had this.
Interesting. So you're just kind of filling the space in the back.
Yep. Because it has a lot of nice sustain to it. Almost like a bell-like quality.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I'm glad to hear you say that, because it is funny. Sometimes when I play on a patch like that, or we call a patch a different sound on the piano, that you find yourself sometimes things don't sound the same. You'll be playing too much, or it gets too muddy, and that's an interesting, that kind of clears things up for me as far as kind of staying out of the way, or maybe a little bit of less is more when you're playing on
it's a little different approach
on a Rhodes sound. Cool. All right. Well, let's go through the tune a little bit.
Okay.
This one I think is obviously it was sung. It was Jackson 5 did the tune, right? Which I assume Michael, when he was probably that tall, was probably sang it. But now, how do you start to interpret? And this is an age-old question we deal with here on the show. How do you interpret melodic lines to make them kind of interesting, knowing that you're not singing it, and knowing that we can't bend the sound on a piano, and knowing that we can't, anything you can think of personally, like mentally, what do you work through when you're trying to make sure that the melody is interesting?
I mean, a lot of time nowadays, I have to admit, there's not a lot of thought put into it. It's just, I just start playing the melody and my style just kind of comes out. Of course I do the Delia-da.
Delia-da? Oh, Delia-da.
Why
don't you slow down and give that one to us, just what you did. That'll be a funny one for someone to look at.
It's just it's like a triplet.
Delia-da.
And then maybe a
so
whole step grace note.
you're kind of dancing around the actual note you're trying to land on, instead of.
A little great, half a whole note grace.
Kind of a slide or whatever you want to call it. Okay.
Then one of those, one of the Floyd Kramer, Vince Guaraldi licks.
No, we haven't seen that. What's a Floyd Kramer lick? We've talked about it a few times. So that's
Yeah, it's like a little And I do these all the time. I do them too much. I mean, I always fall back on these. It's just like a third.
Okay.
You know, and then you got this little whole, like a whole tone grace note, whole step. So it just goes up.
Now, an interesting thing about that is I'm seeing that, not to get too technical, but quite often we're always talking about, gee, you got to keep the melody note on top, right? The melody's on top, and you fill in some tones with the rest of your fingers or whatever else you're doing, but that melody needs to be out top. But in that case, it's like that Floyd Kramer lick, or in your case, it's a Vince Guaraldi lick, is really, I think, where that comes from. In that case, sometimes you are playing this harmonic note above the melody.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
Because the melody note at that point was the F sharp.
This is a melody.
But you played a note
up here
on top
now.
of it.
Yeah, I'm with a harmony above it.
Yeah, and that doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah.
Because we talk a lot about, people say, well, how do you lay everything out? Say, well, you want to have the melody and the chords and the bass line, and kind of separating it that way. But that's something to note. You get that identifiable sound.
If I could just say, the first time I ever heard anyone do that was Vince, when he played Mañana de Carnaval, way before Castrofade or the Peanut. Instead of doing, he would do.
Yeah, you hear that harmonic note?
And that's Vince Guaraldi immediately. Yeah. So, he can do that. Huh? He could actually play a minor third above it. So I kind of took that approach on every step. Not every step, on Never Can't Say Goodbye.
Sure. Well, boy, it really sounds authentic on this Fender Rhodes sound too.
It does, doesn't it?
That's nice.
Yeah.
I'm glad that's a good nugget to take away. That's a good lick to use on an electric piano sound that way.
Yeah, it works great on the electric piano.
Cool. Let's keep working through the tune a few measures, and we'll let's keep playing forward a little bit, and let's see if we can find some other things to pull out.
Yeah, there's a lot of those, and Now, a lot of times I will, instead of just playing the melody, add my thumb, because it's sitting there, and fill out the chord. It'd be a simple way if you were just doing it. Here's a D major 7.
Right.
Now, what I'm doing here is I'm relying on the bass player a bit, so I'm not going to even play the bass, because the bass player is playing that D.
Okay.
Then I'm going to take it to more of a, like we call this 6/9, because we have those.
Sure.
It just kind of. This is another great chord that sounds great on the Fender Rhodes. Is this
big open?
Open, big open.
So I think to try to bring that down so our viewers don't get just blown out of the water, what we're really talking about is taking the notes in a chord, separating them amongst both hands, and keeping space between. You're just saying, look, I've got these 4 notes to play, but let's play those 4 notes in different order across a couple octaves, and make sure there's some space between all the fingers, so it's this kind of airy, open sounding. We call those voicings, obviously, but.
I think also like when you have a D major 7, you can add these notes that the 6 and the 9, which just make it sweeter. Like if you.
Yeah.
That's how you would play it if you.
Sure.
So you're just adding these 2. They just give it a little sweetness, a little extra bit. So I'm taking that. I'm taking out, basically these 2 notes, because I'm already up here. So.
David, if I can switch gears just for a second. You mentioned, and it prompted this question, knowing you normally play with a trio or you play with your group, you're fortunate enough to always have good players to play with, you get one of the obligations taken away because you got a bass player.
Exactly.
Right? So when you switch out of that environment and you start playing solo, share with me a little bit kind of your thoughts on getting the bass played, or how important is it, or do you leave it out some, or just any thoughts you have on that?
Actually, that's an excellent point, because that's a bit of a dilemma. And when I first, I remember when I started doing some TV work and doing some solo piano gigs, it was very hard. I had gotten so used to having the bass player play the root notes that, what do I do? Do I just, one thing is, you just hit it first, and then almost like stride piano.
Sure.
You hit it first, and then you jump up and play the chord.
Yeah.
Da, 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 da. I'll be doing that a little bit when I do these solo piano versions.
Sure.
Or sometimes, like when I used to hear some of those early Bill Evans recordings when he would play solo, he just didn't play the bass, like.
So he just kind of assumed, he's like,
you're gonna, it's implied or something.
That's a better word.
You don't
it's an implied bass.
Yeah,
You say, well, somebody should be out there hearing it.
Right.
Because that is a dilemma. I think that's a constant. It's fun to talk to different players about that. Everyone has a little bit different view, but it's like you need a third hand, you know.
Almost.
If you just had a third, you know, you could play solo piano so much easier if you had a third arm, you know. There's the bass, there's the chords, there's the melody.
It's probably why stride was so it was invented.
Oh, absolutely.
So that you can, you know, you do.
And if you do that well, you play a heck of a lot better than I do. That's for sure.
Oh, that's the hardest. People don't know. The stride piano is so hard.
We've talked about that. I'll have some questions saying, "Well, you talk about all these styles. How about stride?" I'm like, I'm out. I'm out. That's pretty funny. Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and hear this tune then. This will be fun. Now, this tune. Now, have you recorded this on any albums?
I have. This is on Heroes.
Okay, so this was outstanding.
Yeah.
And really, your thought on getting on that album was just because it's a tune you loved playing when you were first working gigs, huh?
Well, I mean, honestly, and this is every artist at one point in their career has to take this into consideration. That is, okay, I'm doing all these kind of hip, you know, Brubeck and Oscar Peterson, but you know, I still got to get some airplay.
Yeah.
You know, airplay makes so Never Can Say Goodbye was how do I find a song that has a little R&B, rhythm and blues component, so it's going to get on the smooth jazz radio, but still something that I came by honestly. So that was how we arrived at it. Well, here's a song I really liked playing as a kid. I dig this tune, but it's also, and sure enough, that's the one that's got all the airplay.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they play that on the smooth jazz radio. Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, I'll be anxious to hear your version of it.
All right. Okay.
Thanks for sharing that with us.
Right. Pleasure.
Terrific.
Thanks.
This excerpt from the public television program, The Piano Guy, has been brought to you by the Roland Corporation, international manufacturer of the finest keyboards, organs, and digital pianos. To find out more, log on to RolandUS.com.